Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Hello, dear friends. Good evening and welcome to Kardec Radio. Welcome to Kardec Radio's study of the divine laws. If you are wondering, dear friend, what the divine laws are, they are laws that are universal, like the constitution of our souls, prepared for us not only on earth, but throughout the universe by the sacred love of our Creator. And if you're wondering as well where to find such laws, in the Spirit's book, dear friends, we learn that these laws are imprinted in our minds because we are children of God, and God wishes us all to have access to the laws that were created by Him. But Kardec also asks, why do we need reminders then if the laws are already in our minds? The reason being that at times we may either forget or choose to leave the laws aside. So this is why the mentors on high recommend that we consciously study those laws. Just like in traffic, dear friends, when we are driving, we don't want to receive any citations. Isn't that right? The same goes with the school of life. We don't want to receive warnings or citations from our own conscience. So, for us to feel fulfilled and to be able to cultivate serenity from within, to be at peace with our own conscience, it is important for us to study the constitution of our souls. And where can we find the constitution of our souls written down, dear friends? Besides our very own conscience, we can find such laws in the third part of the Spirit's book, codified by Allan Kardec. And this is what this program on Kardec Radio is devoted to doing, to studying the divine laws together. Tonight, we are going to study freedom of thought. So we are going to focus our attention specifically on questions 833 and 834 of the Spirit's book. So welcome, dear friends. Feel embraced by the light and love of God. And we will now begin our study. Should you have any questions or comments, please feel free to participate by writing your thoughts on the chat so we can dialogue and learn more from each other, from one another, with the blessings of the mentors of Kardec Radio and our guardian angels that always support us when we choose to instruct ourselves. So let us begin. Question 833 that Kardec writes in the Spirit book is the following. Is there something in human beings which escapes all constraints and through which they enjoy absolute freedom? Excellent question, dear friends. Although Kardec codified Spiritism more than a century ago, the questions are very timely, especially now that we are faced with the pandemic on Earth and we may be feeling constrained and confined ourselves. What to do? Is there absolute freedom? Can we still enjoy freedom while faced with the constraints in life that are natural to life? And the answer from the Spirit Mentors on high is the following. It is through thought that they enjoy unlimited freedom, For thought knows no obstacles. Its manifestation may be hindered, but not erased. Beautiful. So we know now for a fact that we are completely free in our thoughts. Let us think of a few examples to illustrate this fact. Let us think, dear friends, of Nelson Mandela, for instance. He was in jail for decades, and yet once he left, he became the president of a country, of his beautiful country. Why? Because he didn't feel constrained or limited or inferior because of that experience. He felt empowered. He was able to conjure in his mind a beautiful new reality which he materialized as soon as he left jail. Beautiful. Let us think of yet another example, because examples help us to bring the teachings closer to our hearts and minds. Let us think of Paul of Tarsus. We know that Paul of Tarsus, especially through the book Paul and Stephen by Emmanuel through Chico Xavier, we know that Paul of Tarsus was placed in jail as well before he was killed. And even though he was under strict restraints, dear friends, he was able to write letters to all the communities of the early Christians of which he was part. And we still partake of those letters today. He was so free in his thought that he helped disseminate Christianity in many consciences while his body was under restraint. Beautiful example of freedom of thought. Another example, dear friends, is also Gesiel Stephen in the same book. He was taken as a slave after he faced many difficulties before he embraced Christianity. Though he was under very harsh conditions as a slave, he never felt restrained, and he never battled God or rebelled against God for this decision, for this situation. In the book by Emmanuel through Chico Xavier, we see him affirming that if God had placed him in those conditions, it was because it was the best condition possible for him, and that he would find ways to serve God. So while we see Emmanuel describing in the same book his colleagues feeling rebellious, feeling like partaking in a revolution, feeling like they were forsaken, and mostly feeling very restrained, we see Gesiel Stephen, through the power of thought, expressing full freedom of his feelings and of his connection with God. Beautiful examples, right, dear friends? We also have, for instance, the example of Malala. Malala, according to the context of her society, she was very restrained, not allowed to go to school or think freely or express her thoughts freely. She was hindered, as the spirit mentors point out in question 833. Her ability to express her thoughts was hindered because of her gender in the context of the society of which she's a part. But she decided not to partake in those restraints. She decided to make a difference, to speak up for herself. She utilized free will, her willpower, to direct her thoughts, words, and actions a different way and thus contribute to the collective. So we may be wondering, wow, does that mean that all of us can contribute with the collective as well? Yes, every time we share a thought of kindness, a thought of compassion, a thought of Christ consciousness, of charity towards another human being, we are taking action. We are making a difference. We know that through thoughts, we can form currents that are either constructive and positive and enlightening in nature or destructive in nature. In Andre Lewis's books, we see examples of both, dear friends. For instance, in this very book here, Between Heaven and Earth, we see the example of a young woman, a teenager, praying. And her prayer, dear friends, is so sincere, so heartfelt, that the thought current that she emits reaches the colony of Nosolar in the Department of Assistance, and a whole team comes from the spiritual realm in support of her. On, uh, on the opposite end of the spectrum, her mother, discarnated, is so overwhelmed by thoughts of jealousy, dear friends, that she is enveloped in chains of obsession, even though she is theoretically free as a discarnate spirit, even free of her physical body. In her mind, she's experiencing that loop of ideas, loop of repetitive ideas, and those loops are chaining her to sentiments that are weighing her down, heavy sentiments. So, therapeutic question for us, dear friends. Where are we in terms of our thoughts? Are we feeling the lightness and the freedom of thinking constructively, directing our thoughts and choices and free will towards the good? Or are we feeling chained into thought patterns that are heavy for us to carry and that keep repeating themselves time and again, without allowing us to feel renewed from the inside? How is our inner world doing? Because our thoughts, dear friends, are of electromagnetic nature, they pulsate and they connect with other thoughts that are in the same frequency. We may be wondering, how often does this happen? All the time. Just like with cell phones, dear friends. If we have the password, we may enter a Wi-Fi in 1 second. And once we enter that Wi-Fi, we are in. So, in which Wi-Fi system are our thoughts currently, dear friends? In the Wi-Fi of the good, or in the Wi-Fi of despair or heavier feelings? If we are in a Wi-Fi that is keeping us chained to certain thought patterns that do not bring us fulfillment, dear friends, we can most certainly change the password and enter a more constructive and healing Wi-Fi of the mind. How so? We may, dear friends, educate our thoughts. Because we have free will, we are able to direct our thoughts. So if we have a more spicy, or heavy thought come to us, there's no need to punish ourselves because we are learning. But we can tell ourselves, I have a choice to think the good. And right now, I choose to think the good. So we can say to ourselves, we have a God given right to choose what we think and feel. And right at this moment, we choose to think the good. So we do mental surgery here, dear friends. We do mental surgery here, and we take the thought that is spiky or heavy or spicy for us, and we think of a positive one, a lighter one, to replace it. So, for example, if we are thinking, oh goodness, um, we did so much today, we are so tired, the day is overwhelming, and we are feeling heavy because of that, we can replace it by, thank goodness that we were able to do X, Y, and Z today because there are others, brothers and sisters of ours, who are not able to do the laundry, to answer emails, to cook as freely as we are. So we are blessed. In that moment that we choose to find the blessings within the realm of our thinking, we change the password of our mental Wi-Fi. So, dear friend, would you like to change the password of your Wi-Fi? We may change ours as well. It's good to revamp our mental environment so we are even more blessed with the good. We can be our own mental engineers, dear friends. How would we like to design our mental landscape? If we could draw on a piece of paper, what would our mental landscape be? We are all mental landscape engineers. Let us take the opportunity to create a beautiful landscape for ourselves, shall we? And with that invitation, we are going to move to question 834. Kardec asks, are humans responsible for their thoughts? Very good question. So are we responsible for our thoughts? The spirit mentors from on high answer, yes, they are responsible before God. God alone can know their thoughts and condemn or absorb them according to divine justice. So very clear-cut answer from the mentors from on high. At times, dear friends, when our thoughts may be wavering and we may be having difficulty with connecting with the Wi-Fi of the good, we may think, oh goodness, we are not going to talk to God now or pray because we are not really thinking the good at the moment. So how shall we talk to God and with this type of mental landscape? And we have the answer here. It doesn't matter what our mental landscape looks like because God already knows it. God already knows each and every one of us perfectly. God knows who we were in the past, who we are becoming, and best of all, God already sees us as pure spirits. So God already sees our potentials that are developing right now in this very blessed incarnation as full-blown uh, seeds of divine light. Isn't it beautiful that God already sees us in full bloom, dear friends? So if we at times are feeling irritated, insecure, or out of sorts, it's okay because God understands that life on earth is a redemptive struggle, that it is through the struggle that we learn. And because God constantly vouches for us every time we breathe, God is vouching for us. God believes that we shall overcome. So God already knows the difficult thoughts that are common in our earthly stage of eternal life, and God is already prepared to plant a seed of hope in our minds. How do we know that God is already prepared, dear friends, to plant a seed of hope in our minds? Because God assigned to us a guardian angel. Yes, you may be wondering, all of us? Yes, all of us. All of us were assigned with a very beautiful divine friend that is representing God and the ultimate divine friend in our lives, Jesus Christ. And this divine friend is ready to coach us to new ways of feeling and new ways of thinking, and thus new ways of believing and new ways of acting. Did you know, dear friend, that our very own Master Jesus spoke to one of the disciples named Bartholomew, and he knew that Bartholomew was suffering from what we would in the modern times call depression because of the thought patterns that the Christ observed in Bartholomew. But Christ came to him with so much love and attention, saying that he is a child of God and that he is never forsaken because God fathers him with infinite love. God is the perfect mother and father that always provides, and thus Bartholomew would never be an orphan, would never be put to the side, because God would constantly be watching over him. Isn't that beautiful? And we also know that we have closer envoys of God watching over us, dear friends. This is why it is worth it for us to strive to learn to think the good, because we have a whole team in both realms that believe in us and that invest in us and that are ready to log in to our Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi of our minds, in order to inspire us. Beautiful, right, dear friends? And so we know that God is always by our side and that God already knows what we are thinking, so we can pour our hearts to God and know that God will understand, as said Master Jesus to Bartholomew in chapter 8 of the book Good News by Humberto de Campos. So we hope that all of us here or on demand on any of the platforms of Kardec Radio feel reassured for two divine reasons. Reason number one, we are free to think and therefore co-create with God. So let us choose together to think the good and create the good. Reason number two, we now know through question 834 that God remains with us constantly. and that God already knows our thoughts. And we know here that divine justice, as mentioned by Kardec and the mentors on high, is beautifully perfect. Why? Because it balances out justice with mercy and compassion. So God, though she allows for us to undergo challenges, she only allows those challenges to emerge because God knows that we have beautiful qualities that will emerge as a result of the experience as well. And if we are facing a challenge, God already has the answer for that challenge by balancing mercy with justice, love, and compassion. So we can trust our most loving Creator that knows us in our intimacy, knowing, too, dear friends, that we all carry divine seeds of love in our hearts. So let us take the invitation from the spirits, knowing that it is universal that we are free to think in order to spread the good and be instruments of the good together. After all, this is why we were called to be reincarnated and have the gift of spiritism that allows us to reason our faith. Now we believe because we know. Right, dear friends. So we wish you a beautiful night, hoping that we can all engineer beautiful mental landscapes for ourselves and others, materializing the good with the power of our thoughts, feelings, and actions. And we hope that we all feel the blessings of God constantly being provided to us, dear friends. After all, we are all children of God, beloved just as we are. So we wish you a beautiful evening, dear friends, right, Steban? A beautiful evening to you, dear friends. Many blessings if you're listening to us live. A big hug if you're listening to us on demand. Another big hug. And God willing, we will be back again to continue studying the divine laws on Kardec Radio on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. God willing, we will see you then. Many blessings.